The pregnancy test trembled in Ember's hands, the two pink lines blurring through her tears. Joy flooded her chest, warm and golden like summer honey, pushing aside the constant ache that had lived beneath her ribs for the past 3 years. 3 years of trying to be enough for Marcus. 3 years of his disappointed glances and barely concealed frustration. But this tiny life growing inside her, would change everything. She pressed her palm against her still flat stomach, marveling at the secret it held. Their pup, the future of the Silver Moon Pack. Marcus would finally look at her with pride instead of that cold distance that made her wolf whimper and retreat. "He'll be happy," she whispered to her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked fragile, all sharp cheekbones and anxious gray eyes, her auburn hair hanging limp around her shoulders. "He has to be." Her wolf stirred uneasily, but Ember pushed the worry away. She'd spent too long second-guessing herself, too many nights wondering why the mate bond that should have been her salvation felt more like a noose tightening around her throat. This baby would fix things. Babies fixed things. She found Marcus in his office, broad shoulders hunched over territorial maps, his sandy hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the window. Once, she'd thought him handsome. Now she just hoped he'd smile at her again the way he had during their mating ceremony, before disappointment had turned his affection cold. "Marcus?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. He didn't look up. "I'm busy, Ember." "I know, but I have something important to tell you." She stepped closer, the pregnancy test hidden in her pocket like a talisman, something wonderful. The edge in her tone finally drew his attention. His amber eyes swept over her, assessing, always assessing. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The words tumbled out in a rush of hope and terror. "We're going to have a pup." The silence stretched between them like a chasm opening in the earth. Marcus's expression didn't shift into the joy she'd imagined during the entire walk to his office. Instead, his jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. "You're certain?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "I took 3 tests. And I can feel it, Marcus. I can feel our baby." She reached for him, but he pulled away, standing so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. "No." The single word fell like a blade. Ember's stomach dropped. "What? You can't be pregnant. Not you." He turned away, hands bracing against the desk. "Your wolf is weak, Ember. Everyone knows it. You can barely shift without exhausting yourself. You think you can carry an alpha's pup? You think your pathetic bloodline can sustain my child?" Each word landed like a physical blow. "Marcus, please, you'll lose it within weeks." He finally faced her, and the contempt in his eyes made her stumble backward. "Or worse, you'll give birth to something as weak and useless as you are. I won't have my legacy tainted by your inferior genetics." "That's not true." Tears burned her throat, but she refused to let them fall. "Not yet. The pack healer said I'm healthy. The baby is healthy. Then reject it." He crossed his arms, utterly unmoved by her distress. "Get rid of it before anyone finds out." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. Her mate, the one the moon goddess herself had chosen for her, was telling her to destroy their child. "I won't." Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Marcus, this is our pup, our baby." Something dangerous flickered across his face. "Then you leave me no choice." He strode past her, and her wolf suddenly howled in warning. Ember chased after him, her heart hammering against her ribs as he headed toward the great hall where pack members were gathering for the evening meal. Number whatever he was about to do, it wouldn't be good. "Marcus, wait." He spun on her at the entrance to the hall, and the cold calculation in his eyes froze her in place. Then he pushed through the doors, his alpha presence rolling out in waves that silenced every conversation. Dozens of faces turned toward them, pack members she'd grown up with, wolves she'd considered family. "I have an announcement." Marcus's voice rang through the hall with absolute authority. Ember is no longer my mate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ember's knees nearly gave out. She claims to carry my pup, but I reject her claim. His words were precise, surgical in their cruelty. She's too weak to bear an alpha's bloodline, too pathetic to be the mother of Silver Moon's future. I reject her, and I reject any spawn she might produce. The mate bond, already frayed and thin, shattered. Ember screamed, the sound raw and animal as agony tore through her chest. It felt like her heart was being ripped from her body, like every nerve ending had been set ablaze. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Through the haze of pain, she saw pack members turning away, saw pity and relief in equal measure on their faces. Relief that it was her being cast out and not them. The Silver Moon Pack had always valued strength above all else, and she'd never been strong enough. You have until dawn to leave pack territory. Marcus stood over her, unmoved by her suffering. If you're still here when the sun rises, I'll have the guards remove you by force. He walked away, and the pack followed him, leaving her sobbing on the cold stone floor. Hours might have passed, or minutes, she couldn't tell. Eventually, when no more tears would come, Ember forced herself to stand on shaking legs. Her small cabin at the edge of pack territory yielded few possessions worth taking: clothes, a water canteen, the silver necklace her mother had given her before dying of fever when Ember was 12. She left everything else behind, including the version of herself who'd believed she was worthy of love. The forest swallowed her as night fell, ancient pines rising like sentinels on either side of the narrow path leading away from Silver Moon lands. Her wolf was too broken to shift, so she stumbled forward on human feet, branches catching at her clothes and hair. The rejection wound throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of her failure. At the border, where Silver Moon territory ended and neutral lands began, Ember's legs finally gave out. She crumpled against a massive oak tree, her hand still pressed protectively over her stomach. The baby was so small, so fragile. How could she protect them when she couldn't even protect herself? Child. The voice was ancient, layered with power that made the air shimmer. Ember's head jerked up. An old woman stood before her, though Ember hadn't heard her approach. She wore tattered robes that might have once been white, and her eyes glowed silver in the darkness, the mark of an elder wolf, one of the oldest of their kind. "Please," Ember whispered, "I don't have anything worth stealing. I'm not here to steal." The elder moved closer, and suddenly she didn't seem quite so old. Her face shifted in the moonlight, as if she existed in multiple ages at once. "I'm here because the moon goddess sent me to deliver a message." Hope flickered weakly in Ember's chest. What message? The elder knelt beside her, placing one weathered hand over Ember's stomach. Power pulsed between them, warm and bright, and Ember gasped as strength flowed back into her exhausted body. The baby's presence became clearer, a tiny spark of life that called to her wolf. "Your pup is special, little Ember, destined for greatness." The elder's voice held reverence. "This child will unite the kingdoms under moon and stars. They will bring balance where there is chaos, peace where there is war." "I don't understand." Ember's voice cracked. "Marcus said they'd be weak like me. Marcus is a fool who cannot see beyond his own pride." The elder stood, and power radiated from her in waves. "Your weakness was never weakness at all, child. It was restraint. Your true nature has been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake. When it does, kingdoms will tremble. But how can I protect them? I have nothing. I am nothing." "You are a mother." The elder's expression softened. "And there is no force in this world more dangerous than a mother protecting her young. Now go. Head north, toward the mountains. Your destiny awaits in the shadow of the Obsidian Palace." The Alpha King's territory? Terror shot through Ember. Everyone knew stories about Roman, the ruthless king who ruled the werewolf kingdoms with an iron fist. They'll kill me for trespassing. Perhaps. The elder was already fading, becoming transparent in the moonlight. Or perhaps the king has been waiting for you without knowing why. Trust your path, Ember. Trust your pup. Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the echo of power in the air. Ember sat in the darkness for a long moment, her mind racing. She could head south instead, try to disappear into human towns where werewolves rarely ventured. But something in the elder's words had resonated with her wolf, had made that tiny spark of life in her womb pulse with recognition. North, toward danger and destiny. She struggled to her feet, exhaustion weighing down her limbs, but determination straightening her spine. If her pup was truly destined for greatness, then she would do everything in her power to ensure they survived long enough to fulfill that destiny, even if it meant walking straight into the Alpha King's territory. The journey took 3 days that blurred together in a haze of hunger, exhaustion, and relentless forward motion. Ember's feet bled in her worn boots. Her body screamed for rest she couldn't afford, and the rejection wound in her chest never stopped aching. But she kept moving north, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand. She survived on stream water and the few berries she found along the way, her hands shaking as she pressed them to her stomach each night, whispering promises to her baby, promises that they'd be safe, that they'd survive, that she would be strong enough this time. On the 3rd day, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ember crossed an invisible line that made her wolf bristle with sudden alarm. The air changed, becoming heavy with power so concentrated it made her skin prickle. Ancient pine trees gave way to massive oaks that seemed to watch her with sentient awareness. Royal territory. She'd crossed into the Alpha King's lands. Fear gave her a burst of energy, but it was too late. They emerged from the shadows like wraiths, 6 wolves in perfect formation, their coats gleaming black in the fading light. Elite guards marked by silver collars that proclaimed their loyalty to the crown. Ember's wolf was too weak to shift, too broken to fight. She stumbled backward, and they moved with her, silent and coordinated. "Please," she managed. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll leave." The largest wolf shifted, becoming a mountain of a man with scars crossing his dark skin and eyes like chips of obsidian. "Too late for that, rogue. You're coming with us." He moved faster than her exhausted body could react, catching her around the waist as her knees buckled. The world spun, and darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The last thing Ember felt before unconsciousness claimed her was her hand splaying protectively over her stomach, a silent prayer that her baby would forgive her for failing them so soon. When awareness returned, it came with the sensation of movement and the sound of massive doors opening. Ember forced her eyes open to find herself being carried through a palace that stole her breath. Obsidian walls soared overhead, shot through with veins of silver that caught the light from hundreds of floating orbs. The floor was polished black stone that reflected everything like still water. And at the far end of an impossibly long throne room, a man sat waiting. Even from a distance, his power was overwhelming. It pressed against her skin like a physical force, making her wolf cower and submit in the same instant. The guard carrying her set her on her feet, and Ember's legs trembled as she forced herself to stay standing. The Alpha King rose from his throne in one fluid motion. He was tall, taller than Marcus, broader through the shoulders, with midnight black hair that fell to his collar and features carved from stone. But it was his eyes that trapped her, gold, bright as the sun, burning with an intensity that made her feel transparent. As if he could see straight through skin and bone to the frightened, broken creature huddling at her core. He descended the dais steps slowly, each footfall echoing through the silent chamber. Ember couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd expected immediate execution, but the Alpha King's expression was unreadable, his gaze locked on her with such focus that the rest of the world seemed to fade away. He stopped an arm's length away, and Ember felt the pull. an inexplicable tug in her chest that had nothing to do with the shattered mate bond and everything to do with the raw magnetism of the male before her. Then his eyes dropped to her stomach. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Without warning, he stepped forward and placed one large hand over her belly, possessive, protective, claiming. Heat radiated from his palm, sinking through her skin, and the baby responded, that tiny spark of life pulsing with sudden recognition. The Alpha King's eyes widened fractionally. When he spoke, his voice was deep enough to resonate in her bones, commanding enough to make every wolf in the room submit. This child is under my protection. His hand remained on her stomach, and his golden eyes lifted to meet hers with an intensity that stole her breath. And so are you. Ember's world tilted. She waited for the rest, the conditions, the demands, the price she'd have to pay. But the Alpha King simply stood there, his hand warm against her stomach, his expression fierce and protective in a way that made something crack open in her chest. For the first time since Marcus's rejection, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. The quarters Roman assigned to Ember were nothing short of magnificent and utterly suffocating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to glow silver in the moonlight, their panes crafted from glass so clear it felt like no barrier existed at all. The bed could have held 5 wolves comfortably, its posts carved from dark wood that matched the obsidian walls, dressed in linens softer than anything Ember had touched in her entire life. A bathing room adjoined the bedroom, complete with a pool-sized tub that steamed invitingly, and the closet held more gowns than she could wear in a year. A gilded cage was still a cage. Ember stood at the window 3 days after her arrival, watching guards patrol the gardens below with military precision. They never looked up at her window, but she felt their awareness like a physical weight. Protection or imprisonment? She couldn't tell the difference anymore. Her hand rested on her stomach, now slightly more rounded. The baby was growing, thriving in ways that made the palace healer, a kind older woman named Vera, smile with genuine pleasure during each examination. But Ember couldn't shake the feeling that she'd traded one trap for another. "You're healing well," Vera had told her that morning, her weathered hands gentle as they'd pressed against Ember's abdomen. "The pup is strong, stronger than any I've felt in decades." The words should have brought comfort. Instead, they reminded Ember of the Elder's prophecy, of the destiny she didn't understand and couldn't control. Her baby was special, powerful, wanted by a king whose motivation she couldn't fathom. Why had Roman claimed protection over them so readily? What did he want in return? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Ember turned to find a young servant girl entering with a tray of food, the third meal of the day, all of them elaborate enough to feed a small pack. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the gardens after sunset, my lady," the girl said, her eyes downcast in deference. "My lady," as if Ember were someone worthy of respect instead of a rejected she-wolf with nowhere else to go. "Tell him I'll be there," Ember replied, because refusing the Alpha King seemed like an excellent way to discover just how much of a cage her luxurious quarters truly were. The gardens at night were otherworldly. Moonflowers bloomed along winding paths, their petals luminescent in the darkness, and the air smelled of night-blooming jasmine, the same scent the elder wolf had left behind. Water trickled somewhere nearby, a gentle sound that should have been soothing, but only made Ember more aware of how alone she was. Not alone. Roman stood beneath an ancient willow tree, his massive frame somehow both dangerous and graceful in the silver light. He'd shed the formal attire she'd seen him wear in the throne room, dressed now in simple dark pants and a shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body. Those golden eyes found her immediately, tracking her approach with an intensity that made her wolf stir for the first time since the rejection. Not in fear, in something far more complicated. "You came," he said, and his deep voice seemed to resonate in her bones. "Did I have a choice?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, defensive walls rising automatically. Something flickered across his expression, Not anger, but something that might have been pain. You always have a choice, Ember. If you wish to remain in your quarters, I won't force you into my presence. The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. She'd expected commands, demands, the kind of controlling behavior Marcus had wielded like a weapon. Instead, Roman simply waited, giving her space to decide. Ember took a step closer, then another. Why am I here? Why did you claim protection over me and my baby? Because the moment I sensed your pup's presence, I knew. Roman moved toward her slowly, each step deliberate, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. Your child's wolf called to my alpha soul in a way nothing has in centuries. This pup is extraordinary, Ember, destined for something far greater than either of us can imagine. The elder said the same thing. Ember's hand moved protectively to her stomach. That my baby would unite kingdoms. But that doesn't explain why you care. Roman stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smell the cedar and smoke scent that clung to him. May I? He gestured toward her stomach, and after a moment's hesitation, Ember nodded. His hand settled over the slight swell of her belly, warm and steady, and power pulsed between them, the same recognition she'd felt in the throne room. But this time, she felt more. The baby responded to Roman's touch, that tiny spark of life brightening, reaching toward the Alpha King with instinctive trust. Your pup knows me, Roman said softly, wonder threading through his voice. Recognizes my alpha soul as kin, as protector. His golden eyes lifted to meet hers, and the raw emotion in them stole her breath. I lost everything once, Ember. My family, my pack, everyone I loved. I rebuilt from ashes and blood, and I swore never to care for anything again because caring meant vulnerability, meant loss. His thumb brushed across her stomach in an achingly gentle gesture. But your child, I cannot explain it, but protecting this pup feels like the purpose I've been searching for. Like destiny. Ember's throat tightened. You don't even know me. No, he agreed, but I'd like to. They stood in the moonlit garden, Roman's hand still resting on her stomach, and Ember felt something shift inside her chest. Not the mate bond, that had been shattered beyond repair, but something new, fragile as spun glass and just as precious. I'm broken, she whispered. Marcus said I was too weak, and maybe he was right. I couldn't even protect myself, let alone— Marcus is a fool. Roman's voice turned hard, dangerous. And if he ever speaks your name again, I'll rip out his tongue. His free hand lifted, hovering near her face, asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. You walked for 3 days with a rejection wound burning in your chest, refused to give up on your pup even when you had nothing left to give. That's not weakness, Ember. That's the strongest thing I've ever witnessed. Tears burned her eyes, threatening to fall. She'd spent so long believing Marcus's words, accepting that she was deficient somehow, not enough. But Roman looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, and it terrified her how much she wanted to believe him. I don't know how to trust again, she admitted. Then don't. Not yet. Roman's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear that had escaped. Stay here. Let me protect you and your pup. Let me prove that not all alphas are like the one who broke your heart. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, we'll figure out what comes next. What if I'm never ready? Then you'll still have a home here, and your child will still have my protection. He said it like a vow, absolute and unshakable. I ask nothing in return, Ember. Just the chance to keep you both safe. The words should have sounded too good to be true, but standing in the moonlight with Roman's hand warm against her stomach, and their baby responding to his touch with such trust, Ember felt something she hadn't experienced since before Marcus's rejection. She felt safe. Over the following days, Ember found herself seeking Roman's company more often. He never pushed, never demanded, but his presence became a constant she hadn't realized she was craving. They walked in the gardens after sunset, their conversation stretching longer each night, covering everything from pack politics to childhood memories to the books they'd both loved. Roman was nothing like the ruthless tyrant rumors painted him to be. He was thoughtful, careful with his words, and possessed a dry humor that occasionally surprised laughs from Ember she'd thought lost forever. When he spoke about rebuilding the werewolf kingdoms after generations of war, passion lit his eyes in ways that made her chest ache. And he was gentle with her in ways that made her wolf purr with contentment. Small touches, a hand at the small of her back when they walked, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her tea, the way he'd steady her when exhaustion made her stumble. Each contact sent warmth spreading through her body, different from the mate bond she'd shared with Marcus. Deeper somehow, more real. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one evening as she watched him crouch beside a garden fountain, his large hand gentle as he coaxed an injured bird to accept help. This powerful, dangerous king had walls as high as hers, scars as deep, but he was letting her see past them, trusting her with glimpses of the man beneath the crown. It terrified her. "Penny for your thoughts?" Roman's voice pulled her from her spiraling anxiety. He'd released the bird, now watching her with those perceptive golden eyes that always seemed to see too much. "I was just thinking," she said carefully, "that you're not what I expected. Disappointed?" His tone was light, but she caught the thread of genuine concern beneath it. "No. The opposite, actually." Ember moved closer, emboldened by the privacy of the moonlit garden and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "Everyone says you're ruthless, cold, but you've been nothing but kind to me. I can be ruthless when necessary." Roman's expression grew serious. "I've done things that would make you run from me if you knew. Built my kingdom on blood and bone. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to see me as something I'm not." He reached out, tucking a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear. "I want you to know exactly who I am, Ember. The good and the terrible. And then, if you still choose to trust me, it will be a real choice, not one based on desperation or lack of options." The honesty in his words made her eyes burn. "You're giving me a choice. Marcus never did. I'm not Marcus." Roman's jaw tightened, and power rippled through the air around them, a reminder of just how dangerous he could be. "And I never will be." Ember believed him. Word spread like wildfire through the werewolf kingdoms. The Alpha King was sheltering a rejected she-wolf, protecting her unborn pup. The gossip reached Ember through worried glances from servants and the increased guard presence around her quarters. She felt the weight of political implications she didn't fully understand pressing down on her shoulders. Roman assured her everything was fine, but tension radiated from him in waves she could taste on the air. The storm broke on a morning that started deceptively peaceful. Ember was in the healing wing with Vera when the commotion reached them, raised voices echoing through the palace corridors, the sound of multiple wolves snarling in challenge. Her heart jumped into her throat, primal fear making her wolf cower. "Stay here," Vera ordered, her kind face suddenly hard with authority. But Ember couldn't obey. That distinctive voice rising above the others, arrogant and cruel and horribly familiar, froze the blood in her veins. "Marcus." She ran toward the throne room on instinct, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach, terror and fury warring in her chest. Palace guards tried to stop her, but she pushed past them, driven by a need to face the male who'd destroyed her. The throne room doors stood open, and the scene inside stole her breath. Marcus stood in the center of the polished floor, flanked by two wolves from Silver Moon Pack. He looked exactly as she remembered: sandy hair, amber eyes, broad shoulders. But now she could see the cruelty in the set of his mouth, the entitled arrogance in his stance. How had she ever thought him handsome? And Roman stood between Marcus and the doors, his massive frame vibrating with barely contained rage, golden eyes blazing with lethal promise. The temperature in the room had dropped, frost forming on the obsidian walls, power rolling off the Alpha King in waves that made even his own guards take an involuntary step back. Ember. Marcus's eyes locked on her, and disgust curled his lip. There you are. We're leaving. She's not going anywhere with you. Roman's voice was death itself, cold and absolute. She's still my mate. You rejected her. Roman moved, faster than Ember's eyes could track, and suddenly he had Marcus by the throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. You cast her out. Abandoned her and your unborn pup. You have no claim here. Marcus struggled, his face turning red, but Roman's grip was iron. Ember stood frozen, caught between terror and savage satisfaction at seeing her former mate finally face consequences for his cruelty. She's property of Silver Moon, Marcus choked out. She's under my protection. Roman's claws extended, pressing into Marcus's throat hard enough to draw blood. And if you ever come near her again, if you so much as speak her name, I will end you. Do you understand? You can't. Roman's hand tightened, cutting off Marcus's words. His eyes had shifted to pure gold, his alpha power filling the room until Ember could barely breathe under the weight of it. She'd never seen him like this. Utterly lethal, a predator with no mercy in his soul. I am the Alpha King, Roman said softly, each word precise and terrible. I can do anything I want, and right now, what I want is to rip you apart for what you did to her. His gaze flicked to Ember, and something in her expression must have shown her fear because his grip loosened fractionally. But she's been hurt enough. She doesn't need your blood on her conscience. He threw Marcus across the throne room. The other Alpha crashed into the far wall hard enough to crack the stone, slumping to the ground with a groan. Get him out of my territory, Roman commanded his guards. If he crosses my borders again, kill him. The guards dragged Marcus away, and his two companions followed quickly, smart enough not to challenge the Alpha King's decree. The massive doors slammed shut, leaving Ember alone with Roman and the lingering scent of violence in the air. Roman turned to her slowly, his chest heaving, eyes still bright with fury. Are you all right? Ember couldn't speak. She was shaking, adrenaline and old pain, and something that felt dangerously close to gratitude flooding through her system. Roman had defended her, brutally, absolutely, without hesitation. Ember. He moved toward her, and she flinched, not from fear of him, but from the overwhelming intensity of everything she was feeling. Roman stopped immediately, pain flashing across his face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lost control like that. You didn't need to see. Thank you. The words burst from her lips, surprising them both. Thank you for protecting me. His expression softened, the deadly predator fading back into the gentle male who'd held her baby with such reverence. Always. I will always protect you. That night, assassins came. Ember woke to the sound of breaking glass and moved on pure instinct, rolling from the bed as shadowy figures poured through her windows. Her heart hammered against her ribs, terror making her movements clumsy as she stumbled toward the door. A blade whistled past her ear, embedding in the doorframe. Ember screamed, and power exploded through the palace, Roman's presence, furious and immense, answering her distress. The assassins wore masks that seemed to absorb light, their movements too fluid, too fast. Magic, Ember's wolf whimpered. Dark magic. One grabbed her arm, spinning her around, and she saw the blade arcing toward her stomach. Roman crashed through the door in an explosion of splintered wood and lethal fury. His claws found the assassin's throat before the blade could connect, ripping it out in a spray of blood. More guards flooded the room, and the fight became chaos. Ember pressed herself into the corner, her hands wrapped protectively around her stomach, watching Roman destroy anything that came near her with savage efficiency. He was magnificent and terrifying, every inch the ruthless king she'd heard stories about, and she couldn't look away. When the last assassin fell, Roman stood in the center of her destroyed bedroom, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't his. His golden eyes found her immediately, scanning for injuries with desperate intensity. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, barely human. Ember shook her head, unable to form words. Roman crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands, still stained with blood, framing her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you or the baby?" "No." The word came out as a sob. "Roman, what?" "Shadow Council." He spat the words like a curse. "Ancient wolves who want to maintain the old ways, the endless territorial wars. They must have heard the prophecy about your pup." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and his eyes blazed with emotion she couldn't name. "They tried to kill you, tried to kill our—" He stopped, jaw clenching, but Ember heard what he'd almost said. "Our baby. Not hers. Not even hers and Marcus's anymore. Ours." And the terrifying thing was how right it sounded. "You can't stay in these quarters," Roman said, his voice still rough with lingering fury. "I'm moving you to my private wing. I'll watch over you myself. Roman, please." The single word held such raw vulnerability that it made her chest ache. I can't lose you, either of you. Please let me keep you safe." Ember looked into his eyes and saw the truth he'd been hiding. This wasn't just about duty or prophecy anymore. Roman cared about her baby, with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel cherished for the first time in her life. "Okay," she whispered. Roman's private wing was nothing like her luxurious quarters. It was his sanctuary, filled with personal touches that revealed the man beneath the crown, shelves of books with worn spines, weapons displayed with care, windows that overlooked the mountains instead of the gardens. His bedroom held a massive bed draped in dark furs, and he'd installed her in the adjoining chamber with a door between them that he left open. "So I can hear if you need me," he'd explained. That first night, Ember lay in bed listening to Roman moving around in the next room, his presence a comfort she hadn't expected. When nightmares woke her, memories of Marcus's rejection tangled with assassin's blades, she found Roman sitting in the chair beside her bed, keeping watch. "Go back to sleep," he'd murmured. "I'm here. Nothing will hurt you." She'd believed him. The storm hit 3 days later, violent enough to rattle the palace walls and turn the sky black at midday. Thunder crashed like the mountains themselves were breaking, and lightning turned the world white. Ember tried to be brave, but each boom of thunder made her flinch, brought back memories of Marcus's rejection, of standing before the pack while her world shattered. She pressed her hands over her ears like a child, curled in the chair by the window, and tried not to cry. "Ember?" Roman's voice cut through the storm's rage. She hadn't heard him enter, but suddenly he was kneeling before her, concern etched into his features. "What's wrong?" "I'm fine." The lie was obvious, undermined by the tears streaming down her face. "No, you're not." He reached for her hands, gently pulling them from her ears, and when the next boom of thunder made her whimper, he made a decision. "Come here." Roman pulled her from the chair and into his arms, carrying her like she weighed nothing. Ember should have protested, should have maintained the careful distance she'd been trying to preserve, but she buried her face against his chest instead, breathing in cedar and smoke and safety. He settled them on his bed, his back against the headboard, Ember cradled against his chest with his arms wrapped securely around her. One hand splayed protectively over her stomach, and the baby responded to his touch with that now familiar warmth. "Tell me," Roman said softly. "Tell me what you're thinking." So she did. The words poured out. How Marcus had rejected her during a thunderstorm. How the pack had watched with cold indifference. How she'd spent 3 years trying to be enough and failing every single time. She told him about the constant criticism. The way Marcus had made her feel small and useless. How even now she sometimes believed his words. Roman held her through it all, his arms tightening with each revelation, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. When she finally fell silent, drained and exhausted, he spoke. "I lost my family when I was 16, he said quietly. A territorial dispute that escalated into full war. I watched my parents die defending our pack, watched my younger sister fall to an enemy alpha's claws, his voice roughened with old pain. I was supposed to die with them, but I survived, and the guilt of that nearly destroyed me." Ember tilted her head back to look at him, seeing the grief etched into his features. "I rebuilt from nothing," Roman continued. "Gathered the scattered survivors, forged alliances through blood and battle, and took the crown through sheer force of will. I made myself into something powerful enough that no one could ever hurt me again." His golden eyes met hers, vulnerable in ways she'd never seen. "But I was empty, Ember. I had power and control and absolutely nothing that mattered. I told myself I didn't need love, didn't want it, because love meant caring, and caring meant loss." "What changed?" she whispered. "You." His hand moved from her stomach to cup her face. "You walked into my throne room, terrified and exhausted and still protecting your baby with everything you had left. You looked at me with those gray eyes, and for the first time in decades, I felt something besides emptiness." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and heat sparked where he touched. "I tried to convince myself it was just about the pup, about the prophecy, but it's not. It's you, Ember. Everything about you." Her breath caught. "Roman, I want to claim you as my mate," he said, the words raw and honest. "I want to raise your pup as my own heir, give them the love and protection they deserve. I want to spend every night holding you like this, and every day proving that you're worth more than any male in any pack could ever deserve." He leaned down until his forehead rested against hers. "But only if you choose me. Only if you want this. I won't force a bond on you, won't trap you the way Marcus did. You have to choose freely." Ember's heart pounded against her ribs. This was everything she'd dreamed of when she'd first learned about mates, before Marcus had twisted those dreams into nightmares. Roman was offering her love, partnership, a future where she was cherished instead of tolerated, and she was terrified. "I don't know if I'm brave enough," she admitted. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." Roman's lips brushed her forehead, achingly gentle. "But I'm not asking for an answer right now. I'm just asking you to let yourself feel safe. Let yourself heal. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Thunder crashed outside, but Ember barely heard it. She was too focused on the way Roman held her, the warmth of his body against hers, the steady rhythm of his heart. For the first time since Marcus's rejection, since before then even, she felt like maybe she could be enough. Maybe she was worth loving after all. She tilted her head up at the same moment Roman looked down, and their lips met in a kiss that sent electricity racing through her veins. It started gentle, tentative, but deepened when Ember's hands fisted in his shirt, and she pressed closer. Roman growled low in his chest, his arms tightening around her, and the kiss became consuming, full of promise and desire and emotions too big to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered, "and I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready, but I need you to know. Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours if you want it." Ember's eyes burned with tears, but for the first time, they weren't tears of pain. "I'm scared. I know. So am I." He pressed another soft kiss to her lips. "But we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." That night, Ember fell asleep in Roman's arms, listening to the storm rage outside and feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. And somewhere deep inside her chest, in the place where the mate bond had shattered, something new began to grow, fragile and precious and terrifyingly real. She was falling for the Alpha King. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a terrible thing. Morning brought with it a sense of peace Ember hadn't experienced in years. She woke wrapped in Roman's arms, his body curved protectively around hers, and for a moment she just existed in that warmth. His hand still rested on her stomach, and she felt her baby stirring, responding to his presence. But peace was fragile. The summons arrived during breakfast. An official decree from the Northern Pack Council requiring Roman's immediate presence at a summit to address territorial disputes. He read the message with growing tension, his jaw tightening with each line. "I don't like this," he said finally. "The timing is too convenient." Ember's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? The Shadow Council just tried to kill you. Now suddenly there's an urgent summit I'm required to attend?" Roman set the parchment down, his eyes hard. "It feels like a trap. Can you refuse? Not without political consequences that could destabilize everything I've built." Frustration roughened his voice. "The old laws are absolute. If I don't attend, it gives my enemies ammunition to claim I'm becoming a tyrant, that I don't respect pack traditions." Fear curled in Ember's chest. "How long will you be gone?" 3 days, maybe 4. Roman reached across the table to take her hand. "I'll leave my most trusted guards with you. My beta Theo will oversee your protection personally. You'll be safe here." Ember wanted to believe him, but the worry in his eyes told her he wasn't entirely convinced either. They spent the day together, Roman canceling his meetings to stay by her side. They walked in the gardens, his hand never leaving the small of her back, and talked about everything and nothing. When evening came, he held her close, his lips brushing her temple. "I'll come back," he promised. "Nothing could keep me from you." "I know." Ember tilted her face up for his kiss, pouring everything she couldn't yet say into the press of her lips against his. Roman left at dawn, and Ember stood at the window watching his carriage disappear into the distance, her hand pressed against the glass. The palace felt emptier without him, colder, despite the servants who tried to keep her comfortable. Theo, Roman's beta, a different Marcus entirely with kind eyes and a ready smile, checked on her regularly. "The king made me swear on my life to protect you," he said. "You're safe here, Lady Ember." The first day passed slowly. The second dragged even longer. By the third day, Ember's worry had transformed into gnawing anxiety that she couldn't shake. Roman should have sent word by now, some message to let her know he'd arrived safely. Instead, there was only silence. On the fourth morning, a servant Ember didn't recognize entered her chambers with breakfast. The woman was older, with gray streaking her dark hair and eyes that seemed kind. "My lady, I have news from the north," she said quietly. Ember's heart jumped. "Is Roman all right?" The servant's expression filled with what looked like genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry, my lady. The Alpha King. He's decided to remain at the summit, indefinitely." The words didn't make sense. What? He sent word that now that he's secured the prophesied child, his focus must be on ruling the kingdoms. The servant moved closer, lowering her voice. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but he's not coming back, at least not for you." Pain exploded in Ember's chest, sharp and devastating and horribly familiar. "No, not again. This couldn't be happening again." "That's not true," she whispered, but doubt crept in like poison. "Roman wouldn't. I know it's hard to accept." The servant's hand touched her shoulder, and Ember was too numb to pull away. But powerful males often make promises they don't keep. "You were useful to him, a way to secure the prophesied heir. Now that you're safely here, under his control." The implication hung in the air. Ember's mind raced, trying to find holes in the logic, but her battered heart, already broken once by Marcus, screamed that she'd been a fool to trust again. Roman was a king. What would he want with a weak, rejected she-wolf, except for the powerful baby she carried? "I can help you," the servant said softly. I have family in the Southern Territories, far from here. They'll take you in, keep you and your baby safe. You don't have to stay here and wait for him to decide what to do with you. Ember looked at the kind-faced woman and saw salvation. Or maybe she just saw what her broken heart wanted to see. A way to run before she could be hurt again, before Roman could reject her the way Marcus had. When? She heard herself ask. Tonight, after the guards change shifts. I'll come for you. Ember nodded, and the servant slipped away. She stood alone in her chambers, Roman's chambers, where he'd held her through the storm and kissed her and promised her everything, and felt her world crumbling for the second time. She'd been so stupid to believe she could be enough, so naive to think a king would truly want someone like her. Her hand moved to her stomach, to the baby growing inside her. At least she'd have this. At least her pup would survive, even if her heart didn't. When darkness fell and the servant returned, Ember followed her into the shadows without looking back. She left behind the gilded cage and all the foolish dreams she'd allowed herself to believe in, and walked once more into an uncertain future. Behind her, in the Northern Territories, Roman fought desperately against a magical binding that held him prisoner, his roars of fury echoing across the mountains as he tried to reach the woman he loved. But Ember couldn't hear him. She could only hear the lies whispering that she'd never been worth staying for at all. The binding spell wrapped around Roman like iron chains forged from darkness itself, anchoring him to the stone floor of the northern summit hall, while the Shadow Council's magic pulsed through the air like poison. 3 days. 3 days of struggling against bonds that should have been unbreakable, while his soul screamed that Ember was in danger. The council members who'd orchestrated this trap had made one critical miscalculation. They'd underestimated what Roman would sacrifice to reach her. On the 4th morning, as dawn light filtered through the ancient windows, Roman stopped fighting the magic. Instead, he reached deep inside himself, past the alpha power that had made him king, past the centuries of control and restraint, to the raw, primal core of what he was. Not just an alpha king, a male whose mate was in danger. The realization hit him like lightning. Ember was his mate. Not in the traditional sense, not through the moon goddess's official bond, but through something deeper, choice and need, and a connection that transcended ritual. His soul had recognized hers from the moment she'd stumbled into his throne room, and now that soul demanded he reach her. Roman threw back his head and roared, pouring every ounce of his power into shattering the binding spell. Pain exploded through his body as magic fought magic, ancient darkness meeting unstoppable will. The stone floor cracked beneath him, spreading in spiderweb patterns across the entire hall. Windows shattered, raining glass like diamond tears. The spell broke with a sound like the world splitting open. Roman surged to his feet, power radiating from him in waves that sent the northern pack wolves scrambling backward. The ones who'd helped the Shadow Council trap him cowered as he stalked past, his eyes blazing pure gold, his alpha presence so overwhelming that several shifted involuntarily in submission. "Tell your council," Roman said softly, his voice deadly calm, "that I'm coming for them. And when I find them, I'll make them wish they'd never been born." He shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf exploding through the summit hall doors and racing south, toward home, toward Ember. The journey that had taken days by carriage took hours in wolf form, Roman pushing his body beyond natural limits. His beta Theo's frantic mental call reached him when he was still miles from the palace. "She's gone, my king. Ember's gone." Roman's howl of fury echoed across the mountains, sending birds scattering from the trees and small prey animals fleeing in terror. He poured on more speed, his paws barely touching the ground, until the obsidian palace rose before him. Theo met him at the gates, his face pale with guilt and fear. "I'm so sorry. There was a servant, someone we didn't know. She helped Ember escape, but—" "Not escape." Roman shifted back to human form, accepting the clothes one of his guards hastily provided. She was taken. The Shadow Council's been planning this. His hands clenched into fists. They made her believe I abandoned her. The words tasted like ash. After everything Ember had suffered, after Marcus's brutal rejection, the council had fed her worst fears, had made her think Roman was just like the male who'd destroyed her. Where? Roman's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Theo gestured, and Roman's best tracker stepped forward, a female wolf named Kira with a scar across her face and eyes sharp as broken glass. I followed Lady Ember's scent as far as the eastern border, where it crosses into the Forsaken Lands. She hesitated. My king, no one goes into the Forsaken Lands and returns. The shadow creatures there. I don't care if I have to fight my way through every demon in that cursed place. Roman was already moving, gathering weapons from his armory with brutal efficiency. Silver-edged blades, blessed steel, the ancient war axe that had belonged to his father. Gather my elite guard, everyone who's willing to follow me into darkness. We're all willing. Theo's hand landed on Roman's shoulder. She's our Luna, even if the ceremony hasn't happened. We protect what's ours. 20 wolves assembled in the courtyard, the most skilled warriors in Roman's kingdom. They shifted as one, a pack bound by loyalty and purpose, and followed their king toward the Forsaken Lands. The border was marked by dead trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches reaching toward the sky like clawed hands. The air itself felt wrong here, thick and cloying, tasting of decay and old magic. Roman's wolf wanted to turn back, instinct screaming danger, but he pushed forward. Ember's scent lingered like a ghost trail, fear-soaked and heartbreaking. Roman followed it with single-minded focus, his pack spreading out behind him in protective formation. The shadow creatures came at dusk. They materialized from the darkness between trees, things that had once been wolves but had been twisted by forbidden magic into something else entirely. Red eyes glowed in the gathering dark, and their howls sounded like screaming. Roman met the first wave head-on, his jaws closing around a shadow throat, tearing through substance that felt like smoke and tasted like nightmares. His pack fought beside him, their coordination flawless, but for every creature they killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Blood matted Roman's fur, some his own, most belonging to the things trying to keep him from Ember. He fought with savage efficiency, every instinct focused on one goal: reach his mate. When the Shadow Council's warriors appeared, living wolves corrupted by dark magic, Roman's fury reached a new level. These were the ones who'd orchestrated Ember's kidnapping, who'd tried to kill her unborn pup, who'd fed her lies about his abandonment. He tore through them like they were made of paper. Kira howled a warning, and Roman's head snapped up. Through the trees ahead, a massive stone structure rose from the cursed landscape, ancient and wrong, pulsing with malevolent power. The scent of Ember's fear emanated from within, sharp enough to make Roman's vision blur red. He threw back his head and howled, pouring everything he was into the sound. Love and fury and desperate devotion, a call that echoed across the Forsaken Lands and beyond, reaching into dimensions even shadow magic couldn't touch. "I'm coming," the howl said. "Hold on, I'm coming for you." And in the ritual chamber deep within the stone structure, Ember heard it. Ember's wrists burned where silver chains bit into her skin, the metal sizzling against her flesh with a pain that never quite faded into numbness. The ritual chamber around her was carved from obsidian shot through with veins of something that pulsed like corrupted blood, and symbols she didn't recognize covered every surface. The servant who'd helped her escape, whose name Ember had learned was Mara, stood among the Shadow Council members, her kind expression replaced by cold calculation. Ember had been such a fool. Again. "The binding will break at moonrise," said the council leader, an ancient wolf named Corvus, whose eyes held centuries of malice. "When it does, we'll drain the prophesied power from the unborn pup before it can manifest. Without that power, the child is meaningless, just another weak half-breed." His words should have devastated her. A week ago they might have. But something had changed in Ember during her captivity, hardened by betrayal into something stronger than despair. Her hand pressed against her stomach, feeling her baby's presence like a warm light in the darkness. "You won't touch my pup," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Corvus laughed, the sound like bones breaking. "You're chained with blessed silver, girl. Your wolf can't even surface, let alone shift. You're helpless, helpless." The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it memories of Marcus calling her weak, of years spent believing she wasn't enough. But then she remembered Roman's voice. "You walked for 3 days with a rejection wound burning in your chest. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever witnessed." And she remembered the elder wolf's words. "Your weakness was never weakness at all. It was restraint. Your true nature has been sleeping." The council members began their ritual as the moon rose beyond the chamber's single window, its light filtering through the corrupted stone in shades of sickly green. They chanted in a language that made Ember's bones ache, and power began to gather around her, pressing against her skin like invisible hands reaching for her baby. No. Ember closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the fear and pain, past the rejection wound that still ached in her chest. She reached for that part of her that had survived Marcus's cruelty, that had walked through the wilderness alone, that had stood before the Alpha King and refused to break. She reached for her wolf. The silver chains burned hotter as her wolf stirred, but Ember didn't pull back. She pushed harder, and her wolf rose to meet her with a fury that took Ember's breath away. Not the weak, cowering creature Marcus had made her believe existed. Something ancient and powerful, silver bright and devastating. Power exploded through Ember's body like lightning through water. The chains shattered, blessed silver flying apart as if it were nothing more than glass. Ember's wolf surged forward, and she shifted for the first time since Marcus's rejection. But this wasn't the small, uncertain wolf she remembered. This was something magnificent. Her fur gleamed silver in the moonlight, shot through with patterns that looked like ancient runes. Power radiated from her in waves that made the Shadow Council members stumble backward, their expressions shifting from confidence to shock. "Impossible," Corvus breathed. "A Luna wolf. They're extinct." "Apparently not." Ember's wolf voice was deeper than she'd expected, resonant with authority she'd never known she possessed. She moved between the council and the door, her body positioned to protect her unborn pup at all costs. "You want my baby? You'll have to go through me." The council attacked as one. Ember met them with a ferocity she'd never known she was capable of, her silver wolf moving with deadly grace. Claws met flesh, fangs found throats, and power blazed around her like a shield. She was outnumbered 10-1, but maternal fury made her unstoppable. When Mara lunged for her exposed side, Ember's jaws closed around the false servant's throat, tasting blood and betrayal. When Corvus's magic lashed out like whips of shadow, Ember's own power rose to meet it, silver light burning through darkness. She was losing. Even with her newfound strength, even with the Luna wolf power singing through her veins, there were too many of them. Blood matted her silver fur, exhaustion dragged at her limbs, but she refused to fall, refused to let them reach her baby. Then she heard it, a howl that made her heart stop and restart with painful hope. Roman. The bond between them, the one she'd felt forming during those nights in his arms, suddenly blazed to life like a star igniting. Not the traditional mate bond of the moon goddess, but something deeper, something they'd chosen. "I'm coming," his howl said, and Ember knew it was true. He hadn't abandoned her. He'd been fighting to reach her all along. "Hold on," she whispered, to Roman and to her baby and to herself. "Just hold on." Her silver wolf threw back its head and howled in response, the sound harmonizing with Roman's in a way that made the ritual chamber's walls tremble. The Shadow Council members faltered, their confidence cracking as they realized what they were truly facing. Not a weak, rejected she-wolf, a Luna wolf with an alpha king fighting his way to her side, and together they would be unstoppable. The stone doors of the ritual chamber exploded inward in a shower of rubble and ancient magic, and Roman's massive black wolf burst through like vengeance incarnate. His golden eyes found Ember immediately, taking in her silver wolf form, the blood matting her fur, the way she stood protectively over her own stomach. The rage that filled him was biblical. He crashed into the nearest Shadow Council member with enough force to snap bones, his jaws closing around the male's throat and ripping it out without mercy. Theo and the elite guard poured in behind him, engaging the council warriors in a battle that turned the ritual chamber into chaos. But Roman's focus was singular. He fought his way to Ember's side, his body positioning itself to protect her flank, and together they faced Corvus. The ancient wolf had shifted into something massive and wrong, corrupted by centuries of dark magic until he barely resembled a natural wolf anymore. His eyes glowed red, and shadows writhed around him like living things. "You cannot stop what's already in motion," Corvus snarled. "The old ways will prevail. Your precious prophecy will die here." "No," Roman growled, his voice resonating with absolute authority. "The only thing dying here is you." He and Ember moved as one, their attacks coordinated as if they'd fought together for years instead of minutes. Roman's brutal strength combined with Ember's Luna Wolf magic, creating something neither council member nor guard had ever witnessed. When Roman's claws raked across Corvus's side, silver light from Ember's power followed, burning through the ancient wolf's defenses. When Ember's jaws closed on Corvus's leg, Roman's alpha dominance forced the older wolf into submission, making his movements slow and clumsy. They were magnificent together, devastating. Power built around them, silver and gold intertwining in patterns that lit up the ritual chamber like dawn breaking. The mate bond between them blazed to life fully, no longer tentative or fragile, but absolute and unbreakable. It manifested visibly, auras of silver and gold wrapping around both wolves until they seemed to glow from within. "True mates," someone whispered, awe threading through the words. "Chosen by destiny itself." Corvus lunged one final time, his corrupted form fast despite its size, going straight for Ember's exposed throat. Roman intercepted him mid-leap, his jaws closing around Corvus's neck with finality. The ancient wolf's body went limp, and the dark magic holding him together dissipated like smoke. Silence fell over the ritual chamber. The remaining Shadow Council members stood frozen, their leader dead at the Alpha King's feet, watching silver and gold power dance around the two wolves who'd defeated them. Slowly, one by one, they lowered themselves to the ground in submission. "We yield," the eldest said, her voice shaking. "The prophecy is unfolding as the moon goddess intended. We will not stand against it." The air in the chamber suddenly changed, becoming thick with power that made even Roman's alpha presence feel small. Moonlight streamed through the window with unnatural brightness, and a figure materialized from the light itself, ethereal and beautiful and terrifying in her divinity. The moon goddess. She was smaller than Ember had imagined, barely taller than a natural wolf, but the power radiating from her was incomprehensible. Her fur seemed to be made of moonlight itself, shifting between silver and white and every shade between, and her eyes held the wisdom of eternity. Ember and Roman shifted back to human form simultaneously, dropping to their knees in respect. The goddess moved toward them, and Ember felt tears streaming down her face from the sheer overwhelming presence of divinity. "Rise," the goddess said, her voice like music and thunder combined. "You have passed every test I placed before you, rejection and betrayal, separation and despair, fear and doubt. Yet you chose each other, again and again, until your bond became unbreakable." She placed one ethereal paw on Ember's stomach, and warmth flooded through her body, healing her wounds, strengthening her baby. "This child will unite the kingdoms, not through conquest or force, but through the example you provide. a love that transcends status and pain, a partnership of true equals. Her gaze turned to Roman, and he bowed his head under the weight of divine attention. You broke an unbreakable spell through sheer force of will, proving that love is the strongest magic in existence. You will be remembered not as a conqueror, but as the king who chose his mate's life over his pride. Then she looked at Ember, and her expression softened into something almost maternal. You survived rejection and discovered your true strength. The Luna Wolf bloodline was never extinct, it was waiting for a heart pure enough to wield it. Your power comes not from aggression, but from protection, from the fierce love that drives a mother to impossible acts. Teach your children this, and they will reshape the world. The moon goddess stepped back, and her form began to fade. I bless your union and your unborn heir. May your reign bring the peace our kind has been seeking for centuries. Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the lingering warmth of divine approval. Ember and Roman turned to each other, and the emotion on his face made her breath catch. He reached for her, his hands framing her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "I never abandoned you," he whispered. "I would sooner stop breathing than choose anything over you." "I know." Ember's hands covered his, tears streaming freely. "I was so scared, but I should have trusted what I felt here." She pressed her palm over his heart. "I love you, Roman. I choose you. Completely." His kiss tasted like coming home, like finding something she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing it. When they finally broke apart, Roman rested his forehead against hers, his arms wrapped securely around her body. "My mate," he said, the words of vow. "My Luna. My everything." Around them, wolves from various packs who'd witnessed the entire event began to shift back to human form, and one by one, they dropped to one knee, acknowledging not just their king, but their new Luna queen. Theo approached carefully, a grin splitting his face despite the blood and exhaustion marking him. "Congratulations, my king, my lady." He glanced at the kneeling Shadow Council members. "What should we do with them?" Roman's arm tightened around Ember's waist, but when he spoke, his voice held justice rather than vengeance. "They will stand trial before the United Kingdoms. Those who acted out of genuine belief will be given a chance at redemption. Those who acted from cruelty," his golden eyes hardened, "will face appropriate consequences." It was the response of a true king, one who understood that strength sometimes meant mercy. Ember leaned into Roman's warmth, her hand pressed over their baby, and looked around the ritual chamber. At the wolves who'd fought for them, at the defeated council members who'd underestimated her, at the male who'd torn through impossible odds to reach her side. She'd been rejected, broken, cast out, and hunted. But she'd survived all of it. And standing in the aftermath, wrapped in Roman's arms with their future growing inside her, Ember finally understood what the elder had meant. Her weakness had never been weakness at all. It had been the restraint of power waiting for the right moment to wake. That moment was now. "Take me home," she whispered to Roman. His smile was brilliant as sunlight. "Always."